The Great Steppe, millenniums of events, hundreds of nomadic tribes and people. They lived, worked, made discoveries, conquered large tracts of lands, and left us some mysteries. To learn more about it, watch the project called Enigma of the Great Steppe. Coming up today, valor by nature, ethnographic experiments, no retreat, no surrender. June 22nd, 1941, 12:05. People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs of the USSR, member of the Political Bureau of the Central Committee of the Soviet Union Communist Party, Vyacheslav Molotov is leaving the office of the Secretary General of the USSR, Joseph Stalin, with paper in his hands. He is moving towards the Central Telegraph, where he's getting on live radio at 12:15 p.m. with a report about Nazi Germany's attack on the Soviet Union. At 12:25 p.m., Vyacheslav Mikhailovich is coming back to the office of the Secretary General. These 10 minutes of live radio have affected the fate of millions of people and have changed their lives forever. Many good films were shot about the period of the Great Patriotic War. The names of soldiers were immortalized, and we honor our fallen heroes to this day. Today, we would like to glance over the past in a different way, with human, spiritual, and emotional sense. Is valor inherited? And if so, who can inherit it? And how many feats did the Pamphilov division actually perform? June 22nd, 1941 is the day of the beginning of war between the Soviet Union and Germany. By law, the Kazakhstanis had to mobilize in such situations. It should be noted that previously people have gone through terrible years. In 1897, according to the first population census of all Russia, the population of our modern Kazakhstan was around 4,800,000 people. Then there was revolution, starvation, collectivization, Stalinist terror in the 1937 and other extractions. However, people who survived all these violent actions conducted by authorities like collectivization, settled lifestyle, ideological mopping up operations, demonstrated the best human qualities, courage, contempt for cowardness, and compassion when it was necessary to stand up for protection of their motherland. The war began with catastrophic losses in the chain of front lines occupied by the enemy. Hundreds and thousands of people died. Entire armies were annihilated. It was necessary to create new divisions, mobilize forces to repel the enemy, and find officers on an urgent basis. There was no time and resources. Once I asked, my question was about the Kalashnikov rifle. Actually, it is a piece of iron that beats back and forth. So I asked the retired general at that time I was in Moscow, why did the USSR make and use such weapons? The Germans had better ones, which was developed by Hugo Schmeisser, and their rifle had accurate shooting, but it was heavier than the Kalashnikov. And the general answered, "Do you understand? Our task was completely different. It is needed to take care of that weapon of Hugo Schmeisser, but we need that any shepherd could fire. The shepherd, who was illiterate, who just used to graze cattle. To hit the target also was not necessary. We just needed as many people to make the density of bullets per square meter higher. And can you imagine? They fought like that." In the summer of 1941, the military commissar of the Kyrgyz SSR, General Ivan Pamphilov, was on a long-awaited vacation with his family in Sochi when he heard a report about the beginning of the war. And he rushed back urgently. First, he arrived in Moscow. He had a meeting with the head of the country. Stalin got to know Pamphilov personally during the Civil War. He ordered the formation of a division in Alma-Ata to lead it and select soldiers. Being a battle-hardened soldier, Pamphilov immediately began to implement the order. I arrived in Alma-Ata and started to form the 316th Infantry Division. The formation of the 316th Infantry Division began in July. The number of volunteers and conscripts of the Kazakh and Kyrgyz Soviet Socialist Republics became parts of this division. According to various sources, the number of soldiers varied from 11 to 13,000 people. Most of them were Russians, Kazakhs, and Ukrainians, locals of Semiricha region. In general, during the war years, almost every fourth Kazakhstan resident was mobilized to the front.
Число казахстанцев, принимавших
The
участие.
number of Kazakhstan residents who took part in the Second World War was comparable to the number of American soldiers who participated in the anti-Hitler coalition. Can you imagine this? In this war, the great country, like the United States, was represented by the same number of soldiers as from small Kazakhstan.
Соединенные Штаты в этой войне представлены были таким же количеством, как и маленький Казахстан.
The soldiers had only 1 month to get prepared for the battles. In August, they were sent to join the army under Novgorod. After arrival, the division was in the second line during 40 days. And Panfilov used this time, at least 8 hours a day, soldiers were trained, mastered the skills of combating in different conditions, at night, in the forest. They were trained to combat against tanks, to throw grenade packets and incendiary bottles. On October 5th, 1941, the division was sent to Moscow.
Так уж случилось, что
It so happened that the wartime fate threw the soldiers from Kazakhstan to the most critical parts and front lines. In particular, the divisions formed in Kazakhstan defended Moscow.
защищали дивизии, сформированные в Казахстане.
By the end of the first decade of October 1941, the 316th Infantry Division took position west of Volokolamsk as part of the 16th Army under the command of General Rokossovsky. It defended the front line with a length of more than 40 kilometers. On October 15th, the first skirmish took place. And it should be noted that the efforts of Ivan Vasilievich were succeeded. His division combated better than many others.
Сейчас в печати появились исследования, если это исследования, а не журналистский фейк, о том, что 28 гвардейцев не было.
Nowadays, there are some studies in the press, but I'm not sure that it is true or not. It might be a hoax of journalists that 28 guardsmen were a fabrication, although there are names of these soldiers in our park of 28 Panfilov guardsmen. This is explained by the fact that some feat was needed to encourage and inspire the army to be brave. So they allegedly wrote about these 28 Panfilov guardsmen who blocked the route to Moscow and did not let the tanks move further. It is true or not, it does not really matter now, because Moscow was defended by soldiers from Kazakhstan. Almost all of them died while defending the capital.
Потому что Москву защитили воины из Казахстана, и они полегли практически все.
By that time, the fascist troops began to execute strategic offensive named Operation Typhoon. The aim of this operation was to capture Moscow and defeat the Soviet army forces. Hitler's offensive towards the Soviet capital was nothing less than an all-out attack. The 316th Infantry Division had to meet a heavy onslaught of the tank groups and 3 rifle divisions of the enemy. During the days of this battle, the soldiers, our compatriots, withdrew no more than 15 kilometers, managed to disrupt the offensive, and preserve the combat capabilities. The 316th Division consists of well-trained soldiers. It is conducting strong defense, but it has a blind spot, a broad location front. During the war years, many German officers mentioned the courage and perseverance of the Kazakhs in their report, and later following lines were in the hymn of Moscow. We will remember that severe autumn. We will remember grinding of tanks and glint of bayonets, and your 28 brave sons will live in centuries. Gumilev used to say this: history is written in your body, in the ground, in the air, in space. And of course, everyone is the representative of history, how our cattle grazed and fed. In the fortress, you cannot hide with cattle. It is necessary to give water to 1,000 cows. Where will you take such water in the fortress? There are only 2 wells. You need to feed cattle. You have to clean up the manure. It is not possible to live and keep cattle in the fortress. The nomads cannot defend themselves in the fortress. He runs to the enemy for thousands of kilometers and fights to death, knowing that there are children, women, and old people behind him. But when the enemy breaks out, the women come out with spears and fight to the last. Everyone knows the names of sniper Aliya Moldagulova, machine gunner Manshuk Mametova, and pilot Huaz Dospanova, whom the fascists called the Night Witch. By the way, the daughter of General Panfilov, Valentina, volunteered to the front, being 18 years old and served as a nurse. She was demobilized after a serious injury at the very end of the war. Apparently, not only men have valor by nature, but also women of the Great Steppe. Let me tell one story of this example. Once, Tokhtamish Khan of the Blue Horde was walking across the steppe with one of his units, and they faced the enemy, the number of which was more than his people. They saw that the enemy was moving towards them, and the adults handed over their things. They understood that they would die, but at least they can save the lives of their children. Children were seated on horsebacks, and elders told, "You should leave, ride." This is not a legend. There was a true story. So these children rode and rode, and suddenly one of the boys said, "Who are we going to be? Our parents are dead. We will be zhitim," that is, orphan. It should be noted that in the Kazakh language, the word zhitim, orphan, has a more dramatic character than in Russian or English. It is a person who is left completely alone, which means that nobody needs him or her. So they told, "It is better to die with our parents in the battle than to live without them." They raised battle banners. There were 8, 10, 13-year-old girls. They took spears and rushed to fight. And at this moment, other people ran against the enemy. They were rushing with sabers. After seeing this, the enemy immediately ran away, and they all stayed alive. This is a concept. The Kazakhs are not afraid of death. The battle on the Volokholamsk highway brought the first glory of the 316th Infantry Division and later the Guards rank. They made impossible restraining the German offensive on Moscow. However, there was no time to relax. There were heavier fights ahead. Nowadays, many foreign experts argue on one of the main strongholds. Which one is that? How did the motherland help our soldiers to fight? And what proves the fact that honor comes first for the Kazakhs? The climate and the relief of the native land also helped the soldiers to resist the fascist invaders. The Germans, accustomed to quality roads and mild weather conditions, faced a number of problems in the summer of 1941, and therefore they hurried to complete the Operation Typhoon before the temperatures went down. It was heavily raining during our battles in the Berezina and Dnieper regions. We walked through the mud and had to pull our military equipment out of this mud. It was very difficult or even impossible to repair many machines. And we did not know that we have yet to face far worse challenges ahead. November 1941, the Nazis moved to the second stage of Operation Typhoon. They planned to capture Moscow within only 3 days, the 15th, 16th, and 17th of November. The details of the confrontation at the Dubosekovo railroad station, crossing a loop, have long been provided by historians. In recent times, these details have been criticized by foreign experts. However, there is no doubt that Moscow was defended at the expense of their lives. Anything could have happened, but there is such a thing. I just take this a bit different. They all fought and they all died. Most of them were from Kazakhstan, the recruited divisions, and they died under Moscow. They died, and it means that they did not fear and no one ran away. In the war years, there should be some sort of moral ideals. I look at this like follows. They died, and there is no need to presume something. It should be noted that from Dubosekovo to Moscow, the enemy had to walk a little more than 30 kilometers. According to archival data and memoirs, the battle began with the first light of dawn. The enemy opened fire at 10 a.m., and by lunch, many Soviet soldiers were killed. Here are the words of Vasily Klochkov, the political instructor of the 4th Company, who spent the last years of his life in Alma-Ata. "Probably we will die. There's nowhere to retreat. Moscow is behind us." At the end of combats around 5 p.m., the Germans went to rest, warm up, and take a sleep. And our soldiers had to dig new trenches to detain the enemy again tomorrow. Of course, they dug. If you want to stay alive, you will not dig just a small hole, but you will dig trenches long and wide enough. There's one episode when Baujan Mamushali insisted on making the ground swell tight and strong enough. One of the careless soldiers did not strengthen his trench very well, and then Baujan said, "You will die in the first battle. No, I have strengthened it enough. Come in, he shot from the top. He told, Olmisin tiri kawasin dd. If you do not die, you must protect yourself. This is everyday life. The distinguished son of the Kazakh people, Baojan Mamushali, proved himself as a brilliant strategist and a far-sighted commander. In July 1941, he was appointed a battalion commander, combat of the 173rd Infantry Regiment of the newly formed 316th Division. In the Battle of Moscow, his soldiers had a special task to hold the enemy while other soldiers retreat, gain strength, and dig new trenches. Thus, the Nazis faced resistance every 1.5 kilometers. He successfully used the tactics of the battle with small forces against superior forces of the enemy, which was later named Spiral of Mamushali. In the Battle of Dubosekovo, battalion under Baojan Mamushali got surrounded, but they continued the fight. They got surrounded, but instead of fighting his way, he gathered all soldiers and walked to the German rear. They went to the rear, thus weakened the front. How can you shoot when you are shot from behind? After that, he broke the front with the armed group and moved further. He was a brave and far-sighted commander. What feats did Baojan Mamushali perform after the war? What kind of experiment on children is described in the magazine Soviet Ethnography? And why did the Kazakhstan residents prove themselves to be the best at the front? The continuation of Operation Typhoon remains deeply rooted in the memory of Valentina Ivanovna Pamfilova. The Nazis planned to have breakfast in Volokolamsk and dinner in Moscow. The enemy's offensive was suspended by a miracle and at the expenses of human lives. On November 17th, the 316th Infantry Division was transformed into the 8th Guards Division and awarded the Order of the Red Banner. And on November 18th, Valentina's father, General Pamfilov, wounded by a mortar shell, and died. However, his personal qualities and bravery of the division will remain forever in the memory of grateful compatriots and frightened fascists. Valentina Ivanovna later told about how the captive Germans were somberly repeating, "We are leaving. General Pamfilov. His division is very wild." We should read the memoirs of those German generals. They say, "We met with the Mongols under Moscow. They called us so, and they all fought. The division stood up, detained, and did not retreat." According to one of the legends, the German politician, one of Hitler's close associates and most devoted followers, Joseph Goebbels, promised a generous reward for whoever delivered the Soviet speaker, Yuri Levitan, alive. He wanted to make Yuri announce the surrender of the USSR. Instead of this, on May 9, 1945, at 21:50, Levitan's voice, familiar to all people of the Union Republics, announced the surrender of Germany. But the lives of many people have already been changed.
Я бы хотел здесь указать масса неизвестных героев.
I would like to mention names of many unknown heroes to tell about the feats that the Kazakhs performed defending Moscow. I would like to say about one of such feats. Baltabek Zhitbisbayev was a true hero of the war. He was a Komsomol organizer of the Pamfilov division. The commander asked to award him the title of the Hero of the Soviet Union for his feat. This idea was sent to the headquarters. The envoy died on the way. He was killed, and the soldiers who were passing by took his bag and delivered to the special unit. So these documents were in the archives.
Погиб, был убит, и проходящие мимо части прихватили сумку эту и сдали в спецчасть. Так эти документы оказались в архивах.
Zhitbisbayev never received the title of the Hero of the Soviet Union, despite the efforts of his relatives and colleagues. Valentina Pamfilova and Baojan Mamushali advocated for him. By the way, Baojan Mamushali was awarded with the title Hero of the Soviet Union posthumously. There is also a legend about this. Alexander Beck described this story in his novel. When they saved Moscow, Stalin personally rewarded everyone going through the list. Baojan also was there. The orders were lying on the table. Baojan was written as Momishev. The heroes were called one by one. Momishev. Stalin called. There was silence and no one was coming. When he said Momishev for the third time, Baojan told Mamushali. Stalin threw the order on the table. Bauzhan turned, came, and told, "I served the Soviet Union," and then he left. He had his own principles and followed them, and I bow my head before him. Bek Anwar Bekovich knew Bauzhan Mamoucheli personally and had the opportunity to conduct several conversations with him. However, the most vivid acts of the heroism of the talented commander in the post-war period were told by their friends. So there was a situation when Mamoucheli, during one of his walks, met his fellow officer, the second in command of the battalion, who was left homeless. Mamoucheli went with his comrade in arms to the chairman of the city council of Alma-Ata. He told, "Yesen, now my deputy, is sitting in that room with whom we were shooting tanks. He has nowhere to live. I came to ask you to give him a one-room apartment." The chairman answered, "How can I give? I need the local committee decree, then employers' unity committee decree, and so on. He does not have such decrees. He is a pensioner." The chairman told, "No, it is impossible, only after decrees. You know me. You will give him an apartment, otherwise you will not leave this room alive." What? Are you threatening me? So what? Bauzhan told and took his iron-sharpened stick. He had this stick on the chairman. "You know me. I stood up against machine guns, and what do you think? Am I afraid of you?" And he pushed, probably perceived something. The chairman was in a jacket. The chairman got tensed. He pushed the button and told, "Apartment department." So the officer got justice for his colleague, but he never considered it a heroic feat. Bauzhan Mamoucheli was born with such principles like all people of the Great Steppe. This can be proved by the results of studies published in one of the issues of the magazine, Soviet Ethnography. I want to tell about the experiment. In the 1990s, when Gorbachev was the head of USSR, he said that it was necessary to tell all secrets so that the people knew our sincerity. I used to get the magazine called Soviet Ethnography. I received this issue at the post office and opened it. There was a page, the editor's letter. We will reveal the secret topics we conducted in ethnography at the request of higher standing organizations and bodies. I started laughing. I thought it was some kind of ornament or musical instrument, a swirl maybe. I was curious about it. I sat down and read a very interesting article. The experiment was conducted with the participation of children under school age. Representatives of different ethnic groups lived at least 5 generations in Russia and became Muscovites. They were shown the image of a wolf, noting the first emotions and associations. If someone kicks you in the stomach, you will shout, "Oi," and Americans will say, "Ouch," or something like that. It is the first reflex. Children of Slavic nationalities reacted unequivocally, saying that the wolf is scary, gray and dangerous, it can bite, eat, or attack. But when they showed the same picture to the children of Kazakhs, Yakuts, Tuvans, Khakas people born in Moscow, they said, "Brave never gives up on the weak, defends to the last and fights to the death just to defend his family." Do you see? They described an absolutely different way. But nobody told them this and no one taught them. Incredibly, but in the most terrible and dangerous period during the war, when fear, death, and horror were always near, the nomads mobilized their forces, becoming a good example to be followed. I'm surprised that in the last 100 years, in the last century, there was a huge loss of the Kazakh population, and it survived. I think the Kazakh people have changed a lot. A nomad is a very proud man. He is an independent person. The Khans were dependent on the people. If they did not like the Khan, they just could leave him and migrate. His wife had to milk the mare herself. So this psychology was changed in our country. We were forcibly moved to a settled lifestyle, and many worthy skills and nature of the soldiers are gone. But during the Great Patriotic War, all these skills came alive, the nature of the nomad and warrior. The Kazakh